Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. And, this last week, entertainment, pop culture, literature actually took a hit with the passing of Stan Lee. And a lot of people, myself included, took it really, really, really hard. I mean, the man was 95 years old, right? This was an inevitability. This was something that was going to happen. This is something that was eventually going to come for everyone. It's Stan Lee included. The difference between people like me and people like Stan Lee is that Stan Lee is immortal in regards to his legacy, right? Above most people, 99.9% of the population, Stan Lee is just above us all. And so when a man like that, who's so important to pop culture, so important to the current state of geekdom and nerddom and fandom and things like that, passes away, we mourn. And what we don't want are shitty takes on the situation. What we don't want are people like Arnie Hammer that are just like, I see a lot of celebrities that are coming out here and posting photos with Stan Lee. I mean, way to make it all about you. No, you dick. This is people that are expressing their grief by showing sharing the time that they met him, that they spent with him to appreciate the man. He's since apologized, obviously, but he got a lot of shit for it, like a lot of shit. But here comes Bill Maher. And Bill Maher does what Bill Maher does best, which is put his foot in his damn mouth. But the amount of crap he's getting as a result of this, I don't really think is necessarily warranted. Because what he was saying isn't necessarily about Stan Lee himself, but about just the culture surrounding comic books and things like that from, well, a boomer's perspective. But hey, listen, let's find out more because he's addressed Stan Lee's death, saying that adults pretend comic books are sophisticated literature. It's not that it's sophisticated literature. It's that it's a story. It's that it's taking us to another realm, taking us on a wild adventure and one that we can relate to. Comics, at least the ones that were co-created by Stan Lee, were created to express discontent with the times, right? It was created as a way to discuss the current events of the times. Pop culture is nothing if not timely. So to come out and say that it's, people treat it as sophisticated literature, I think is a little bit dumb. I see what he's attempting to say. It's no Charles Dickens. Hell, it's not even, in many cases, J.K. Rowling. Early stuff, not Crimes of Grindelwald. But anyway, it says here that on the Real Time with Bill Maher blog, Maher recognized that the world is mourning Lee's death, but then in his on-brand outspoken rhetoric, went into the relationship adults have with comic books, saying, now, I have nothing against comic books. I read them now and then when I was a kid and I was all out of Hardy Boys. What he already titled, or he wrote this in in a post called Adulting, saying, but the assumption that everyone had back then, both adults and kids, was that comics were for kids and that when you grew up, you moved into big boy books without the pictures. But to be fair to comic books, to some especially, what we find now are very adult themed stories that are surrounded by pictures. Graphic novels are a great example of that. I mean, look at the story of Watchmen, right? It's an amazing, dark, gritty adult story surrounded by amazing, dark, gritty adult pictures. There are always going to be stories that are aimed at children, but oftentimes the greatest of the greats are able to transcend the different generations. Look at The Killing Joke. And yeah, I'm referencing a lot of Alan Moore here because it's Alan Moore, for crying out loud, and he's freaking awesome. Granted, batshit crazy, but freaking awesome. Now, I can understand, again, what Maher is coming from, the position that he's trying to take, that these are comics. They're not Hardy Boys, and even Hardy Boys were easier to read than some comics, and the stories there were simple Scooby-Doo-esque mysteries. And don't get me wrong, I loved the Hardy Boys growing up, but I also loved a good Spider-Man comic. And even as an adult, I look forward to reading my daughter Choose Your Own Adventures and Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew novels. Why? Simply because I will be able to get as much enjoyment out of that as she will. So yeah, these things transcend several generations, not a problem. But Bill Maher, a guy who doesn't have kids, who perpetually believes that he's the adult in the room, even though he oftentimes acts like he isn't, is going to attack comics because he simply doesn't understand it. Again, it's boomers. Boomers don't get comics. They don't get entertainment. They don't get pop culture. They try to, but they fail every single time. Now, he goes on to say here that 20 years ago, adults didn't give up kid stuff, and says that they have pretended comic books were actually sophisticated literature. He adds that there are over 4,500 colleges in America and that we need more professors than we have smart people, before saying that dumb people got to be professors for writing these theses or writing these about comic books. Finishing up here, he says, Or well, it goes on to say, and now when adults are forced to do grown-up things like buy auto insurance, they call it adulting and act like it's some giant struggle. He concludes by saying the problem is we're using our smarts on stupid stuff. I don't think it's a huge stretch to suggest that Donald Trump could only get elected in a country that thinks comic books are important. Now, obviously, come on, that's not true. I mean, Trump played the game. Whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to accept it or not, Trump played the game. And that game is the Electoral College, and he won. He beat out Hillary Clinton because he played it better. She clearly won the popular vote, but that doesn't matter in the Electoral College. So again, trying to argue that Donald Trump won in America because people think comic book stuff is important is ridiculous. Here's the thing, Bill. How ecstatic would you be if they made a Rin Tin Tin movie, right? No, seriously. How ecstatic would you be if they actually sat down and made a modern day Rin Tin Tin, right? Or took some of the old serials you listened to when you were a kid, right? They actually adapted some of those stories, like the Batman, or like Spider-Man was a show back in the 60s when you were a kid. Superman, right, was a show back in the 60s when you were a kid. And what about, oh yeah, now they're making Superman movies have been a thing now for 40 years. Batman movies have been a thing for 30 years this year, right? Spider-Man movies, 20 years, right? I'm just saying there is stuff you grew up with is now being put in the films and people like it because they like the escapism. It has nothing to do with that they're spending their smarts on stupid stuff or that comic books aren't sophisticated literature. It's just pure escapism. And when we live in a world that is constantly threatened with shootings and violence and fires and earthquakes and natural disasters and 24/7 political commentary and just the rhetoric of social media and all of this nonsense, we like to enjoy the simple things. And yes, there's the meme that, oh, I had adulting to do today. Nobody wants to be an adult by nature. Nobody wants to sit there and do these things, work a 9-to-5 job in a cubicle, because they get off on it. No one does that. Well, I'm sure there's one guy, and that's Bob from accounting, and he's a weirdo, and we never talk to him. But the point is that people make jokes about it as a way to just cope with the fact that they realize that their lives are this routine. They're hamsters on a wheel doing the same thing day in and day out. And so they take joy and they take solace in these stories that speak to them, that speak to their greater need for adventure. To many people now, we've already explored the earth. There are no great lands left to conquer. There are no jungles left to explore. There are no great discoveries left to find. That, of course, is not true. But to many people out there, that's kind of how they view life. Comic books, video games, television, movies, it gives them an escape. Let them have it. What we should be doing, Bill, is not teaching people that comic books are bad, blah, 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 but that they should go and follow their passion. And not just blindly follow their passion, but learn a trade. Discover what they want to do when they're younger and work towards it. Build up that mindset. So then when it comes time for them to leave the nest and enter out into the world, they have the skills and the knowledge and the ambition and the drive and the plan to seek their adventures and to conquer their mountains, to overcome their fears and overcome obstacles just like their favorite heroes do in these comic books. The idea behind comic books is that it preaches for the greater good, that good above evil, good will always triumph. And that's what people like about it. They want to know that there's some good left in the world. And when someone like Stan Lee, whose entire mission it was in life was to bring good to fans, passes away, yes, they're upset. And yes, they're going to take criticism of him very difficult right now. But the article does say here, the post seems less about Stan Lee's death and more about the country's obsession with comic books and the movies that accompany them. And here's the thing with that, though, too, because that is actually a relatively true statement. Comic book movies are the highest grossing films right now, and they have been for quite some time. They're spectacles that are fun to go and behold. They're things you do with your friends. They're events that you look forward to, and there's a couple times of them a year. There's nothing wrong with them being popular. They'll be popular for quite some time, but then eventually they won't, and it will be something else. But what is it to you if people like it? What is it to you if people care about that? Right? This blog post is just another example of you not being in touch with the millennial audience, right? You try on your show week after week to reach them, but you also preach into an echo chamber where they applaud if you simply call Trump Orange Man bad. You know this but yet you still revel in that echo chamber. And I'm not going to sit there and decry that, like, I've never done that, because I totally have. But I have to understand that it's an echo chamber. And this pushback against you from those who like comics is a reminder that it may be time to reach out of that echo chamber and look to see what people are saying, because that's what's going to keep you relevant. And this kind of blog post attacking adulting is just another reason why you're old and you're losing touch. I understand where you're coming from. You just said it in a really shitty way. It's true. You did. Anyway, though, I'm curious to know what you guys have to say about this. Do you think Bill Maher has a point? Do you think Bill Maher is just a curmudgeon-y old boomer who doesn't understand the world? I am curious to know your thoughts. Let me know down in the comments. If you guys made it this far, type Stan Lee into the chat so I know. And if you guys please thumbs up the video and subscribe and all that jazz. And I will talk to you all later. Have yourself a fantastic day, and peace out.